Now to our other big story at 5. Jarvis Butts, the man convicted of killing 13-year-old Naziah Harris and sexually assaulting her and other girls, is dead after weeks after being sentenced. His body found at a prison intake center in Jackson.
She got off that school bus just like she did every single day. January 9th, 2024, Detroit, Michigan. A cold Tuesday afternoon. A 13-year-old girl in a pink jumpsuit, a dark jacket, and a pair of black Nikes stepped off her school bus at the corner of Cornwall Street and 3 Mile Drive on Detroit's east side. She had her whole world ahead of her. She had dreams, she had people who loved her, and she had a secret she'd been carrying for months. One that someone else desperately needed to keep buried. That night, Naziah Harris did not come home. At first, her grandmother waited. She told herself kids were sometimes late, but as the hours passed and her phone went unanswered, the waiting turned into panic. By the next morning, she picked up the phone and called it in. 13 years old, missing. Last seen walking away from a school bus stop. Police launched a search. The community rallied. Volunteers spread out across abandoned buildings, overgrown fields, and the cold banks of the Rouge River, passing out flyers with the face of a child who still had her whole life ahead of her. But the deeper investigators dug, the more they realized this was never a random disappearance. Naziah didn't vanish. She was taken, not by a stranger, but by someone she trusted, someone who had been inside her life for years, someone who had a very specific, very dangerous reason to make sure she was never found. And what investigators would eventually uncover was far more disturbing than anyone in Detroit ever imagined. Welcome to True Crime Autopsy. May you and your family stay safe wherever you are. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because we bring you the parts the media never reported. Her name was Naziah Harris. She was 13 years old and a 7th grader at J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy on Detroit's east side. By every account, she was a regular kid. She went to school, she had friends, she had big plans for her life. She was growing up in a world that was supposed to protect her. She lived with her grandmother, Annette Harris, who had been her guardian and the steady force in her life. Annette was the kind of grandmother who noticed everything. When Naziah came home late, when something seemed off, when the light in her granddaughter's eyes dimmed just a little. People who knew Naziah describe a girl who was funny and full of energy, who made friends easily and lit up a room. She was at that age where you're still figuring out who you are, navigating middle school, navigating family, navigating a city that could be tough and beautiful all at once. But there was something happening beneath the surface of Naziah's life that nobody around her fully knew. Something that had been quietly poisoning her world since she was just 11 years old. Her father, Mervyn Jennings, wasn't living with her. He had been estranged for about 8 years, dealing with serious medical problems, including congestive heart failure. He had spent years trying to find a way back into her life, but hadn't been able to reconnect. He wouldn't find out his daughter was missing until 2 Detroit Public Schools police officers tracked him down and knocked on his door. He said when those officers asked him when he'd last been to his daughter's school, he stopped cold. He said he didn't even know what school she went to. Then they told him she was gone. And everything in Mervyn Jennings' world shattered. Detroit's East Side is a neighborhood where people look out for each other. It's a community with deep roots. People who have lived on the same blocks for generations, who know their neighbors by name, who keep an eye on the kids playing outside. It's also a city that has seen its share of hardship, and that hardship has made people both resilient and watchful. Naziah moved through this world the way most 7th graders do. School during the week, her grandmother's house, the rhythms of everyday life. She was connected to an extended family that included cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who were part of her daily world. One of the men deeply embedded in her family circle was a 41-year-old man from Highland Park named Jarvis Butts. He had children with Naziah's aunt. That made him, in the way these things work in extended families, a familiar and trusted presence.
Yeah. Happy birthday. Hey, Jarvisa. You'll be out of town. Come on.
Daddy! It's Look at the day!
Hey,
happy birthday, dog.
Daddy wants in my shoes, man.
Come on, sweetheart.
He ran an auto repair shop. He came around the house. He was known, he was accepted, he was trusted. And he had learned over the years exactly how to use that trust. Looking back now, people who knew the family say there were signs that were missed, dismissed, or ignored. Family members say they had suspicions. They say they called Child Protective Services. They say they warned people, but nobody listened. And a 13-year-old girl paid the price for that silence. No one in that family, in that neighborhood, in that city, could have imagined what was already happening and what was about to happen right under their noses. Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, started like any other day for Naziah Harris. She got up, she went to school, she attended J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy, where she was just a regular 7th grader, sitting in class, talking to her friends, getting through the day. But that morning, before school even ended, she had already made a plan. Using her school-issued tablet, Naziah sent a message to Jarvis Butts. The message was short, direct, and tells you everything you need to know about the kind of control this man had over this child. She wrote, "Don't forget to be there before 3. If you're not there, I will wait." He wrote back, "Okay." She was 13 years old, arranging a meeting with a 41-year-old man, a man her family trusted, as if it were just another ordinary afternoon. When the final bell rang, Naziah Harris got on her school bus. The bus driver confirmed she got off at her regular stop, Cornwall Street and 3 Mile Drive. The surveillance cameras caught it. The last time anyone outside of that circle ever saw her. From that bus stop, investigators believe Naziah went to Butts' auto shop. His own sister was at the shop that evening. She told investigators she left around 6:30 in the evening, and before she walked out the door, she noticed something. There was a little girl, she said, getting in and out of a white Cadillac Escalade she recognized as her brother's. That little girl was Naziah. Later that night, according to cell phone records and other evidence, Butts and Naziah traveled together out to Ypsilanti, a city about 40 miles from Detroit. Then they returned back into Detroit. At 9:30 that night, Butts checked into a motel. There's a receipt. His phone confirms the location. Naziah was never seen alive again. What happened in the hours that followed is something prosecutors have pieced together through digital evidence, phone records, and searches that reveal exactly what Jarvis Butts was thinking and exactly what he was planning. The next morning, January 10th, Naziah's grandmother made the call. Her granddaughter had not come home. She hadn't answered her phone. Something was deeply wrong. Detroit Public Schools Community District launched an initial investigation that same day. They followed up with students, canvassed the area around her bus stop, reached out to anyone who might have seen her. But they kept hitting walls. By February, they brought the case to the Detroit Police Department. The community didn't wait for the authorities to act. They flooded the streets. Within days, search parties were organizing across the east side. Volunteers, hundreds of them, moved through abandoned houses, empty lots, and overgrown fields in the dead of a Michigan winter. Even, according to community leaders, active gang members came out. People who had every reason to stay home were passing out flyers with Naziah's face on them, going door to door, refusing to let a 13-year-old girl just disappear. Detroit Police Commissioner Tamara Liberty Smith, a community leader who knew the family personally, helped lead the search. She said it was one of the most gut-wrenching efforts she had ever been part of. And then the investigators got their first significant break. Near the intersection of 7 Mile Road and Berg Road, an area along the banks of the Rouge River, searchers found something. A pink jumpsuit turned inside out, a dark jacket, a black and red shoe. They were the exact clothes Naziah Harris had been wearing on the day she disappeared. The clothing wasn't just discarded, it was damaged. Investigators noted the damage in a way that suggested there may have been a struggle. At first, police treated this as a missing persons case. That theory would not last long. The discovery of those clothes changed everything. Detectives began retracing every step Naziah had taken on January 9th, and every step taken by the people around her. They executed search warrants, eventually over 20 of them. They pulled surveillance footage, phone records, cell tower data, and financial records. And the more they looked, the more one name kept appearing: Jarvis Butts. Investigators confirmed through cell tower data that between 11:40 at night on January 10th and 1:30 in the morning on January 11th, Butts' phone was placing him directly in the area near 7 Mile and Berg, right where Nazia's clothes were found. His DNA was recovered from those clothes. A woman who had children with Butts confirmed that he had borrowed her vehicle on the day Nazia went missing. His own sister had placed him at the auto shop with a little girl that evening. People close to Butts confirmed they saw the two of them together that afternoon. And then investigators cracked open his phone. What they found wasn't just incriminating. It was a window into the mind of a man who had been planning something unthinkable, and who, when that plan went wrong, chose the darkest possible path. Among the searches on Butts' devices, starting as early as December 2023, a full month before Nazia disappeared, investigators found Google searches for herbal abortions, abortion pills, and one search that stopped investigators cold: a search for whether a person could drink red antifreeze. The phone data opened a timeline that stretched back years. In September 2022, when Nazia Harris was just 11 years old, Jarvis Butts began sending her sexually explicit messages. He had access to her. He was embedded in her family. He was someone she had known since she was small. And he weaponized every ounce of that familiarity to do what predators do: groom, isolate, and abuse. By September 2023, Nazia sent Butts a text that changed everything. She told him she had missed her period. She was 13 years old, and she was pregnant. Wayne County prosecutor Kim Worthy would later stand at a podium and say what needed to be said out loud. She said that when you look at Nazia's face in that last photo, the one she took of herself on her school tablet, smiling, you don't see the horrors she had already endured: the exploitation, the abuse, the pregnancy she had been hiding. By November 2023, Jarvis Butts was fully aware Nazia was pregnant, and the searches on his phone began shifting from abortion options to something far more sinister. Prosecutors believe Butts did not intend to take Nazia to a clinic or a doctor. He intended to handle it himself. The judge at his preliminary hearing put it plainly. She said she believed Butts had attempted a do-it-yourself abortion on Nazia, and when it went wrong, when that young girl's life hung in the balance, he did not call for help. He made a choice to protect himself, not her. Nazia Harris was 13 years old, pregnant by the man who was supposed to be a trusted presence in her family. And in the end, she was alone with him, and she never came home. Here's the part of this story that is hardest to sit with. Nazia Harris did not fall through the cracks of one system. She fell through the cracks of several, all at once. In 2022, a formal complaint was made to Child Protective Services. The complaint named Nazia as a possible victim of abuse by Jarvis Butts. CPS notified the Detroit Police Department. The Detroit Police Department never investigated. An assistant chief would later publicly admit, and this is a direct quote, "We just didn't do enough with it." Family members say they had been raising the alarm for years. Nazia's great-aunt, Janelle Smith Holland, said it simply: "So many systems failed Nazia." And this wasn't the first time Jarvis Butts had been in the system either. He was not an unknown. He was not a man with no record. He had been convicted of sexually assaulting a child back in 2005. He served nearly a decade in prison. He got out, and he immediately went back to doing exactly what he had done before. By the time Nazia Harris got on that bus on January 9th, 2024, Jarvis Butts had also allegedly been abusing an 8-year-old family member. He had allegedly abused a 4-year-old, a crime so devastating that the child was diagnosed with a sexually transmitted disease. He was abusing girls ranging in age from 4 years old to 13. The system knew his name. The system had already punished him once, and the system let him walk right back into another family and do it all over again. While the investigation unfolded, Nazia's father, Mervyn Jennings, was doing the only thing a parent can do when their child is missing. He searched. Mervyn was 46 years old. He had a damaged heart, congestive heart failure that had already put him in the hospital. He had been recovering from a stroke when those 2 school officers found him and told him his daughter was gone. He was a sick man. He was not supposed to be walking through abandoned buildings in Michigan winter. He went anyway. Every day he was well enough to stand up. He went out looking for Nazia, through fields, through buildings, through the cold. With his wife by his side, he covered ground that most healthy people wouldn't attempt. His friend Tamara Liberty Smith said it best. She said Mervyn Jennings literally died of a broken heart. He never found Nazia, and he never got to see justice for her either. Mervyn Jennings passed away over the summer of 2024, months after his daughter disappeared, worn down by illness and grief and a search that never ended. He died still not knowing what happened to his little girl. In September 2024, 9 months after Nazia vanished, Wayne County prosecutor Kim Worthy announced charges against Jarvis Butts. First-degree premeditated murder, second-degree criminal sexual conduct, child sexually abusive activity. She also charged him in connection with the sexual assault of multiple other young girls, crimes that stretched back to 2012. Prosecutors called him, publicly and without hesitation, a serial child predator. A man who had spent decades identifying vulnerable families, befriending the women in those families, and then gaining access to their daughters. 5 girls, ages 4, 7, 8 or 9, and 13. That was the scope of what investigators were able to document. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His DNA on the victim's clothing, his cell phone placing him at the scene where her clothes were found, text messages documenting years of abuse, his own internet search history revealing what he had been planning to do. Butts, when initially questioned by investigators, had tried to play dumb. He said he didn't know Nazia very well. He admitted she sometimes texted him. He said she occasionally helped out at his auto shop. He said he hadn't seen her since late December or early January. Every word of that was a lie, and investigators could prove it. He was charged as a habitual fourth-time offender. A preliminary hearing was held in January 2025. It stretched over multiple days. Witnesses testified: Nazia's grandmother, her aunt, Butts' own sister, a 9-year-old cousin who bravely told the court what she had seen at the auto shop. The judge heard all of it and ruled there was more than enough evidence to send Jarvis Butts to trial. The trial was scheduled for February 23, 2026. 80 potential witnesses. 2 years of investigation. Everything was ready. Then, just 11 days before the first juror was ever called, Jarvis Butts blinked. On February 12, 2026, he stood in a Wayne County courtroom and pleaded guilty. Not to the most serious charge, not first-degree murder, but to second-degree murder, along with 4 counts of second-degree criminal sexual conduct and 1 count of third-degree criminal sexual conduct. 6 cases, 6 guilty pleas. And as part of that deal, he agreed to one condition that meant more to Nazia's family than anything else in the courtroom that day. He had to tell them the truth about what happened to her body. Prosecutor Kim Worthy would later confirm that Butts submitted a statement and that her office was satisfied with it. She didn't disclose what was in it, but she said it was crucial for the family to have some form of closure. Nazia's cousin Roxy spoke to the press. She said she didn't feel the full relief yet. She said she wouldn't feel it until they brought Nazia home. March 12, 2026, sentencing day. The courtroom was packed. They came to say what they had been holding inside for 2 years. Nazia's grandmother, her aunt, Butts' own sister, and some of the other survivors, girls he had abused, who stood up, one by one, and faced the man who had stolen something from them that can never be returned. One girl's impact statement was read aloud by her older sister, while the girl herself sat beside her in the witness stand, wearing sparkly black shoes. She was 4 years old when it started. Her sister read her words to the courtroom. She said Jarvis Butts took away her childhood and shattered her sense of safety. She said she had faced years of pain and trauma because of what he did, and even now she believed he would hurt someone again if he was ever old enough to walk out of prison. Another girl, the one who said Nazia was her best friend, stood up and looked at Butts directly. She said she no longer looked at him as a father figure, no longer as a hero. She looked at him as a monster who caused her trauma and changed the way she would see men for the rest of her life. Nazia's Aunt Marquetta looked the man in the face and asked the judge for the electric chair. She said, "A life for a life." She told him she would never hold Nazia again, never hear her voice, never see her smile. Through all of it, Jarvis Butts sat at the defense table and stared at the floor. He glanced up once, briefly, at his sister, and then looked back down at his feet and did not move. Judge Nicholas Hathaway sentenced him to 35 to 60 years in prison for the murder of Nazia Harris, an additional 10 to 15 years for each of the 5 sexual assault convictions, all running at the same time. His earliest possible release date, September 26, 2059. He would be over 100 years old. 2 weeks after that sentencing, the Michigan Department of Corrections made an announcement. Jarvis Butts was dead. On March 26, 2026, just 14 days into his sentence, corrections staff found him unresponsive in his cell at the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center in Jackson, Michigan. Life-saving measures were performed. They were not successful. Michigan State Police began an investigation. It is currently being treated as a suicide. The reaction from the community was complicated. Some felt relief. Some felt robbed. Nazia's cousin Roxy said that one of the survivors she spoke to told her she could finally breathe, that for the first time in years, she felt the weight lift. But Roxy herself said she still has questions that may never be answered now that Butts is gone. Family friend Tamara Liberty Smith said it plainly. "I feel like justice hasn't been served." The Detroit Police Department released a statement confirming they are still committed to finding Nazia's body. Still committed to bringing her home. As of this recording, her body has not been recovered. Her cousin Roxy has begun building something in her memory, an organization she is calling the Nazia Rapid Response Recovery Team, a group dedicated to advocating for families just like Nazia's. Families who called for help and were not heard. Families who watched their children disappear into the gaps between systems that were supposed to protect them. Butts' own sister, Tiwana, said something at the sentencing that deserves to be heard. She said she hoped her brother would have found a heart and told that family where Nazia was. She said there are many Nazias. She said people are being harmed right now, in this very moment, and people are turning a blind eye. She said we need to do better. Nazia Harris was a 7th grader who liked school and loved her grandmother and had a whole life she was just beginning to live. She was failed by the man who abused her. She was failed by the systems that knew his name and looked the other way. She was failed by the institutions that received warnings and filed them away. She was failed by a world that too often doesn't believe the danger is as close as it really is. Her father searched for her until his body gave out. He never found her. Her body has never come home. And somewhere in Detroit, a family is still waiting. The case is closed, technically. The man who took Nazia Harris from this world is gone. But the questions, the grief, the silence where a 13-year-old girl used to be, those don't close with a court file. They stay open. For the people who loved Nazia Harris, the questions may never fully disappear. Rest in peace, Nazia. Detroit remembers you.